Greetings, everyone, and welcome once more to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the worlds of Magic the Gathering and continue our tour through its history, the various products and pieces of things that they put out, with cards, materials that you might want to learn about? All the different cards, mechanics, all these different things, we're learning about them as we dive into Magic's history. I'm going to be your host and guide here at Dracovin. I can open up a gateway through the blind eternities, planeswalk us over to there so that we can check out what's going on, see what's going on, and learn about it. And today, we have the last set in the Scars of Mirrodin block, New Phyrexia. So if you are prepared, I'm going to put my hand out here. I'm going to open up the gateway through the blind eternities. You gotta do a little bit for me. A bit of a tip. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. Let me know what your experience with New Phyrexia is down in the comments. The gate is open. It's time to go. We've arrived. New Phyrexia, as it comes into being, as it rises from the ashes of Mirrodin, a plane that has had multiple names. I think I did a video on that years ago, so go check that one out. Magenta Mirrodin, New Phyrexia. But regardless, though, we're at New Phyrexia now. The set. So, what do we know about New Phyrexia? What do we want to discuss about New Phyrexia? Let's start with the basics. New Phyrexia was the third set in the Scars of Mirrodin block. Of course, this was the 55th expansion to Magic the Gathering, and its full release was on May 13th, 2011. So, still about 14 years ago, a little less than that. This was an expansion symbol, the Phyrexian symbol. Hey, they won. Our lead designer was Ken Nagel, with head of development being Aaron Forsythe, and art direction by Jeremy Jarvis. We now have reached the time where we can safely say this set is set on the plane of New Phyrexia, because, well, it is. It was 175 cards, of which 10 were basic lands. We'll talk about basic lands coming back again in a small set. 60 commons, 60 uncommons, 35 rares, 10 minutes. It was action in the development. I believe it was Lights, Camera, Action. Hey, haha. And MPH was the expansion code. Now we got some ideas about it. Alright. So, it also included premium cards. I'm not showing off one here, but, you know, basically foils were in this here. So if you hear about magic foils, that was all for them. But this was the conclusion of the story of the Scars of Mirrodin block. The Phyrexians win, they defeat the Mirrans, they take control of the plane. Like 2 sets before, it has watermarks. I showed off the Phyrexian symbol, that's also the watermark. But this watermark is either faction symbol. You still get some Phyrexian and Mirrodin, but kind of like how we've been seeing between previous sets, where the first set was primarily Mirrodin, second set, and it was a little bit of Phyrexian, second set was even. Now, most of the set is Phyrexian at this point in time and favors it. It's basically the inversion, the conquest of this plane, and we're kind of seeing it here very majorly. Again, we also saw that cards, and this is one of the ones that has the symbol here, Force Worship, because you can't attack, and you can return it to the hand. We also did see more Phyrexian cards with Effect and Proliferate, arriving in colors that it wasn't before. These mechanics expanded. Traditionally, there's a lot of mechanics that usually stick to certain colors or stick to certain types of cards. With this case, with, you know, more evergreen abilities, things like Trample, First Strike. Yes, they kind of be in colors, but they can show up in other places, flying, too. In this case, Infect and Proliferate, they're spreading in colors. Red, you get Red Infect here. This mechanic is now here. I'm showing off this Lezit one here in Fallen Ferromancer. That's a 1/1 Infect that can pay some mana and tap to do 1 damage to a target. If it's a creature, hey, it gets a -1/-1 counter. If it's any player who should be target, you just give him a poison counter. Fallen Ferromancer is kind of mean. But yes, we have it in red now, too. And again, mana symbol in there, too. So, we also did see some basically fan-favorite creatures and abilities and things. Well, I should say fan-favorite things related to the Mirrodin plane. The original Mirrodin block, and scars and stuff that showed up in them, coming back as Phyrexian versions of themselves. In this case here, I'm showing off a Toxic Nim. Nim were zombies that were in the original set. Are these fan favorites? I can't say for sure. We're showing off a lot of cards here, so some of these might be the ones. But again, these are a type of creature which we showed up in the original Mirrodin block a bunch of times. There's a 4/1 Infected Generation. Pretty neat. Expensive. But still, pretty neat. And anyway, we also got Karn showing up as a Planeswalker. I'm going to talk about Karn a couple of times before the end of here, but he is the father of machines, according to the Phyrexians, akin to their god, in a lot of ways. And this part of the story has him kind of breaking free of them, and, well, his spark being back in action, him being Planeswalker again. We'll talk about him in a couple of times here before the end. But just know that he is an important part of it, and we got him as a Planeswalker card, finally. We thought the weirdness going on with Karn and Spark and all this kind of stuff. There are storylines we're not going to get into too much here. Venser giving up his spark to reignite Karn's spark, and Karn being also kind of already an artificial spark because it's technically Urza's spark, which is kind of weird. It's a mess of storylines that have come together in a lot of cases. But, yeah, Karn, important character. He is. Basic lands. So once again, we have basic lands. It's one of those things that I've talked about how basic lands aren't in usually the smaller of sets of the block. Normally speaking, there's usually one big set, two smaller sets in a Magic Gathering block. Sometimes, in certain cases, you will get maybe a big set, small set, big set. That's a little rarer than you have had in the past. In this case, it really was a big set, small set, small set. Normally those small sets don't have basic lands, but we've seen them in both cases. In this case, we have the Phyrexia's core on the right here, part of it, matching the color. And then the artifact land from Mirrodin. Yeah, that one on the left is the artifact land from Mirrodin, now Phyrexia's, from green. And in the green core, we have that for all 5 colors. So it shows off these two kind of areas that now everything's fallen Phyrexian. All those artifact lands, Phyrexian, the core, and the connections to the various regions and manas, Phyrexia. I think this is a very good piece of art to show off the storyline as a whole, so I'm kind of big on it. I thought it was very interesting. So, thing is, we didn't know who was going to win. We knew a set was coming out, and we knew it was after Mirrodin the Siege. It was either going to be one of 2 names. Mirrodin Pure or New Phyrexia. Because Wizards didn't want to reveal what faction would win the battle. Granted, I think most of us kind of felt it was probably Phyrexian, better storyline telling, but I think there was a lot of hope of, with the interesting characters and storylines, that Mirrodin Pure would be the success they'd win out. But on March 29th of 2011, basically it was announced that we were New Phyrexia. So this was about basically a month and a half away. Again, we know the spec was out there. We didn't know which one of it was going to be. Now, there was a big controversy around this set too. Spoiling. And we have to look at this nice man here who got in trouble for the spoiling coming out. Basically, the entire set was spoiled on April 19th, 2011. Again, a little less than a month ahead of time. This was before spoiler season would begin. Okay, if you're familiar with Magic at all, basically, before a set comes out, usually they start showing off cards. Nowadays, it's usually connected with various media outlets, various content creators that show off cards. You start seeing the set as it gets built until you get close to maybe a week or 2 out from when the set comes out, and you know everything that's there. Thing is, normally speaking, there's a God book, which contains all the cards of an upcoming set. This God book is usually sent to things like magazines for review purposes before the release of sets. so they have an idea of what's going on. The Godbook got leaked. In this case, the Godbook was sent to Lotus Noir, the magazine, who passed it to our good friend, the pro player here, Guillaume Magnon. Sorry, I'm probably butchering his name. But Magnon was a world champion at the time. He basically shared it with Guilherme Wafutapa and 2 other players in the group. One of those players leaked it. So all 4 players were basically suspended from the DCI for a year and a half for this. Again, it was kind of like a magazine got something they were supposed to get. He was reviewing it for the magazine. He then basically wanted to get some opinions on some friends. One of them leaked it. It was a whisper down the line that, yeah, ended up with the set being spoiled. Let's talk about the story. Of course, again, this is the finale of the clash. The Phyrexians are victorious. The Mirrodins are defeated. They're not completely gone, but they are effectively gone, hidden in places like the core, in areas far off from the influence of New Phyrexia, as the plane is now. And the Scars of Mirrodin, the Quest for Karn book, the third part of it, deals with it. This is the novel, it deals with the entire block. I talked about it with with all the releases here, but yep. This came out in April of 2011, so this was released before the final set. So we got the full story right before then, which leads into New Phyrexia. This wasn't the only source for storyline, though. We, of course, had, webcomics. The Dark Discoveries, which is all about Tezzeret, Elspeth, Koth, and Venser, and their stories of, rescuing Karn, and Venser getting up his life and things like that, deals with a lot of that. There are 3 parts of Dark Discovery that were released in May of 2011, starting on the 5th, the 12th, and the 19th. So these kind of were around the time of the full release. There were some other ones, Corrupted Consciousness, which was early in the year, which dealt with what was going on with Karn. This was in January. And there was also some on the Mirrodin site storylines, webcomics. 5 of them that came out after Dark Discoveries that just deal with what's going on on the plane and a number of the characters that are there. But these are more minor characters, people of the plane, rather than the big planeswalker groups. So the webcomics were out there too for these showing off stuff. Let's talk about the products that were there. We have, of course, our 16-card boosters. Boom! The 16-card boosters had Jin Taxis, Core Augur, Shelter of the Whispered One, and Suture Priest on them. We also, of course, had 6-card boosters, and these had Etched Monstrosity on them. We had 5 intro packs. We'll talk about the intro packs a little bit later, but they're there. Like the last set, we had 2 event decks. Cool. And of course, we had our Fat Pack. Now, we can talk about these 2, Suture Priest and Pristine Talisman. Now, this is one of those interesting things here, because these were previewed at Mirrodin Besieged Game Day. Suture Priest has the New Phyrexia symbol on it. Pristine Talisman, which eventually did get printed at the time of it being previewed, had the Mirrodin Pure symbol on it. So basically, these were 2 cards that were being showed off, that were showing off, the possible directions. Kind of interesting there, and it was during Mirrodin Besieged Game Day we got this preview. Now, there was a pre-release, of course, that was in May 7th to 8th of 2011. Our pre-release card for that set was Sheldred Whispered One. We'll show her off there. Again, we will probably dive into a little bit more on Sheldred a little later, but you can get a good look at her. And one of the Praetors, the powerful lords of New Phyrexia. Of course, for the release day and the launch party from May 13th to 16th, we had a card too. We had Phyrexian Metamorph. There was also a release on Magic Online on the May 30th. 20 bucks. Oh, I know. The notes here are not great. There was Magic Game Day. Game Day took place on June 11th to 12th, 2001, and we had 2 cards there. If you came to Game Day, you get a promotional card, Full Out Priest of Urbrask. And if you were part of the top 8, you would get a full art Mir Superion. Of course, the last promo card that there was for the major promo cards was the Buy-A Box, in which case we had Surgical Extraction. Very pleasant looking there. Now, I'm going to say here, tips and tricks, because we'll talk about this in a second why it's a Japanese tips and tricks, but of the 15 cards, or 16 cards I should say, the 16th card of the 16 cards was a tip or trick, or token, or poison counter. We'll take a look at them. In the case of the tips and tricks, there were 4 of them: Phyrexian Mana, Living Weapon, Infect, Proliferate. I couldn't find a copy that had any good images online. I managed to find a Japanese version of the Phyrexian Mana, but that would have been just that in English. Tips and tricks would have been. In the case of the poison counter, it's subtly different than the poison counters from the previous set. This is a bit of a difference here, too. So it's the new Phyrexian poison counter. So, yes, you've had the poison counters before. This one definitely looks a little different. And then, of course, you have the tokens, which, of course, we had 4 tokens here. These were a Beast, Goblin, Golem, and Mir. The Beast, yeah, very interesting. It goes through a number of cards. But there is something unique about the Golem, Goblin, and Mir. They all are very similar to tokens from Scars of Mirrodin. Phyrexia. This looks like a lot like the Goblin from Scars of Mirrodin. That's Phyrexia. Same thing as the Golem or Mir. Of course, on the other side of all of these things, the tips and tricks, poison token, and the tokens, were advertisements. 14 different advertisements that you can kind of see on the back of the cards. Alright, let's dive into the mechanics of the game. And of course, this introduces Phyrexian Mana. This is where we get this now. That's what it's referred to as here. It's kind of got a colored background and the symbol on top of it, and it marks that this special kind of mana can either be paid with the mana of its color, white, blue, black, red, or green, or 2 life, respectively. You can choose. And for each mana, you could choose that. So if it costs 2 Phyrexian mana, something to cast, you could spend, well, 4, in that case, life, instead of paying that mana cost. Give you a little bit of options there for that. I can kind of show off a colored artifact that has the Phyrexian Mana. Because colored artifacts return. Yes. Last time we'd seen colored artifacts was Future Sight and the Esper Shard of the Alara block. So it has been quite a while since we've seen basically 2 different sets had colored artifacts. This is the first return of them. Not most of the colored artifacts have this Phyrexian Mana then. I don't know if all of them off the top of my head were. I'm going to say that. But certainly speaking, you can see it's here in Rage Extractor, where Rage Extractor. I built a Rage Extractor at deck because it deals with Phyrexian Mana. This is the only time you get the little Phyrexian Mana symbol without the color around it. When you cast a spell with the Phyrexian symbol in it, in its mana cost, it deals damage equal to the converted mana cost of target creature or player. If you play Phyrexian Mana deck, Rage Extractor can be pretty mean. Again, only card that has that as a little symbol on it. So that's kind of a little interesting thing here to kind of take a look at. But I thought it was neat. So, yep. Now, this isn't the only mechanics we had. We don't just have colored artifacts. We don't just have Phyrexian Mana. We have a return of many keywords, including good old Infect. Of course, Infect is returned. In this case, I'm showing off Spinebiter, which you can assign damage as it weren't blocked. Always classic. So you can it can be blocked and killed, but still do that nice poison damage. Of course, we have Proliferating. Grim Infection here. Put a -1/-1 counter on target creature and proliferate. Now it has 2. We had Living Weapons return. Lash Writhe here, which is basically the Nightmare ability. Nightmare is a classic card from Alpha and Beta Unlimited, where it has a power and toughness equal to the number of swamps you control. In this case, this artifact, this equipment, gives equipped creature +1/+1 for each swamp you control. It's a living weapon, so even if you don't, it comes into play attached to a 0/0 Jerk. And its equip cost, Phyrexian. Of course, some things from the Mirrodins return. In this case, Metalcraft does. This is Jorkaden, one of the legendaries. A first strike with Metalcraft, if creatures you control get +3/+0, as long as you have 3 or more artifacts. So, again, he's first strike, he buffs everybody if you want to do some artifacts. Jorkaden's kind of neat. Similarly speaking, with Imprint. This one is Parasite Invader. You exile a land. When the land the same name as the exiled card enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, it deals 2 damage to that player. The thing is, you don't have to exile your own land, you exile target land. So again, if someone's playing a lot of basic lands, you can exile a swamp that they're using, and then whenever they play swamp, they take 2 damage. Parasite Invader. But in this case, we can see Imprint now just wasn't in Mirrodin, kind of how it was before. Now the Phyrexians too. Of course, now Karn. Karn was a big part about this, and the reason I wanted to kind of talk about Karn now is, well, there's some firsts with Karn. First off, he is the first colorless planeswalker. He's like kind of an artifact planeswalker. This is his planeswalker. Also, up to this point, he has the largest amount of loyalty counters added by a first ability, +4, and the most costly ability at -14. Yeah, a lot of firsts here. So for ticking 4 up, target player exiles a card from his hand, targeting 3 down, exile target permanent, and -14, restarting the game, leaving in exile all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn the Liberated. Then put those cards in the battlefield under your control. So yes, exile a bunch of stuff with Karn. Either you exiling it with the -3, or a player, someone exiling a card from their hand. A player for ticking up 4. You can exile stuff from your own hand. And then all the non-aura permanents come back into play, and you restart the game. It's a funky thing, but it's an interesting thing. I'm not going to lie. I don't think I've ever pulled off a card. Some other things that were less mechanical and more themes, or sub-themes, I should say, are, in this case, Splicers. Splicers were 1/1 creatures that put a certain number of 3/3 Golem artifact creature tokens into the battlefield, and then grants abilities to all golems. In the case here, we have Maul Splicer, for 7 mana, puts 2 3/3 artifact creature tokens in the battlefield, and then gives all golems 3 trample. So, with all the Splicers, you'd be giving them all abilities, and basically creating a bunch of tokens, and then, stacking those abilities. We also had a small sub-theme that was nicknamed Blood Tax. These were spells like this one here, Vapor Tax, which resembled utility cards, but with the additional rider that it causes the loss of 1 life. So, we can see here, return target creature to its owner hand, its control loses 1 life. So basically, almost little cantrips, little 1-cost things, little cheap cost things, were a kind of thing about this, and just causing the controller, the target of something, to lose a life and connect it. Again, a little bit of a blood tax. We had, of course, the continuation of the new term that was introduced in Mirrodin Besiege, Poisoned. It doesn't show up in a lot of places yet, too, but we're seeing more of it here. And you're poisoned if every poison counters on you. Vidrian Betrayers has Infect as long as opponent is poisoned. Let's talk about the cycles that were here. We have to start out with the Praetors. So there were 5 cycles, and the Praetors were a big one. I'm going to talk about all the Praetors before the end of the day, but I'm showing off this one first. The Praetors as a group were mythic, rare legendaries that were 1 per color, representing the Phyrexian rulers, each with their own philosophy on what the Phyrexian army and New Phyrexia should be looking like. Basically, you can see that each of them had their own idea for the evolution of New Phyrexia. They usually give a positive position to the player controlling them, and a bad position to the end player. In this case, at the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards. Each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. So, you get to draw a lot of cards, your opponents get to have no cards. And it's a 5/4 flash. Jin Titaxius, Core Augur, kind of mean. If you can get him off and use him. Now, the next cycle was the Chancellors. These were rare creatures that could be revealed at the start of the game for a small effect to take an early advantage. So in this case, Chancellor of Spires is you reveal it from your opening hand. So like if it's in your opening hand, you reveal it. At the beginning of your first upkeep, each opponent puts the top 7 cards of their library in their graveyard. And when Chancellor of Spire enters the battlefield, they cast target instant or sorcery card from the opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. So yeah, if you reveal it in the opening hand, you mill your opponents a bunch. 7 cards. And then when you cast it, you get to use maybe one of them. It's an instant or sorcery. You get to see. We had the Exarchs. So these were uncommon cleric creatures that let you choose either to exercise a positive effect on yourself, or a permanent you control, or an opposite effect on an opponent or one of their creatures. In this case, we have Brutalizer Exarch. When it enters the battlefield, you choose one. Again, you're getting one or the other. You search your library for a creature card, reveal it, shuffle your library, put it on top of it, or put target non-creature permanent on the bottom of its owner's library. Either you get a creature put on the top of your library, or your opponent loses something. Puts on the bottom of their library. Again, these Exarchs do this. They either have a positive effect or a negative effect. You get to choose one when it enters the battlefield. There's the cycle of the Shrines. These were uncommon artifacts that gain charge counters at the beginning of the controller's upkeep, and whenever you cast a spell of a specific color. This one being the white one here. And then they can be sacrificed for an effect which scales the number of charge counters. So this one, beginning of upkeep, cast a white spell, get a charge counter, and for free and tapping, you sacrifice it to get 1/1 colorless mirror for each charge token on them. So, Shrine of the Loyal Legions is getting you a bunch of creatures that you can kind of build up to. And then, of course, we had the Soul Eaters. These were 5 common artifact creatures with activated abilities that cost a single Phyrexian mana of the specified color. So you had a white, blue, red, green, black. This is the blue one here, where for Phyrexian mana, you can make it unblockable. Yeah, it's unblockable. It's what exactly it's household problem. So there were 3 reprinted cards that did appear in this set. We had Enslaved, which was first printed in Player Chaos. This one, you gain control of a creature at the beginning of your upkeep. Each enchanted creature does 1 damage to its owner. So you steal it and deal damage to them. There was Evil Presence. This hasn't been seen since 5th edition. Evil Presence originally comes from, well, Alpha Beta Unlimited. It's an old card. Classic. Definitely. And then you had Phyrexian Hulk, which started as uncommon in Tempest, last seen in 9th edition, and now is a common. So it is a reprint, but it's also had its rarity changed too. We had 2 color-shifted cards. We had, of course, Priest of Urbrak and Priest of Gix. Priest of Urbax enters the battlefield and adds 3 mana to your mana pool. The same can be for the Priest of Gix. You cast it, you get mana back. So they're kind of for free, except it goes from black to red. Similarly speaking, the other color-shifted card is Reaching Bite, which is a color shift of Steel Strength from Prophecy. So target one creature gets +1/+1, another gets -1/-1. Again, a color shift here. We did have a number of simply better cards. Despise. Despise is just better than Ostracize. Why? Well, first when you look at target player's hand and choose a creature card that discard it, Despise for the same mana as you get a creature or Planeswalker. It's just better that way. You know, you can't get beyond that. And then similarly speaking, for strictly better is Marrow Shards for Rain of Blades. This one, they do the exact same thing. Rain of Blades deals 1 damage to target attacking creature. Marrow Shards does 1 damage to each attack creature. Marrow Shards does the same. How's Marrow Shards better? Cost of Phyrexian mana. So that means I don't have to have a mana open Marrow Shards to do 1 damage to the attacking creatures. I can just pay 2 life. I give up 2 life, do 1 damage to a bunch of things, maybe save myself a little bit of problems there. Maybe. Let's talk about some notable cards that were in the set. Phyrexian Obliterator. We'll start with this nice one here. This is an updated version of the Phyrexian Negator, basically, which couldn't be reprinted because it was in a reserve list. They have similar names. They're both 5/5 Trampler, but this is kind of a reverse of the Negator. The Negator had a big drawback that you, you sacrifice the many permanents as damage is kept. In this case, the Obliterator Well, when it's dealt damage, its source's controller sacrifices that many permanents. Kind of an opposite here. We also had some other Chancellors. The Chancellor cycle actually had a bunch of really good cards in it that kind of became very important. Chancellor Forge, Annex, and Tangle. And had a lot of play in a lot of places. Chancellor of the Forge, well, reveal it, you get a Goblin token with haste during your first upkeep. And when it enters the battlefield, you get X Goblins, or X number of creatures you control. So, yeah, you get a creature with haste if this is in your opening hand. Pretty good. Similarly speaking, that is weird. That broke there. Alright. I don't know why that broke. Hey, technical issues. Shouldn't happen. Sometimes they do. Chancellor of the Annex. So, this one, if you do reveal it in your opening hand, each opponent casts their first spell of the game. It gets countered unless they pay 1. First spell of the game for each of your opponents costs 1 more. Unless they want it countered. And whenever opponent casts a spell, counter it unless they pay 1. It's just kinda mean. And then, of course, Chancellor Tangle. Reveal it at the beginning of your first main phase. You get an extra mana. And then it's just a Vigilance Reach. So it doesn't really get a lot of other ability in play for each creature. But hey, I have my open hand. I have 1 extra mana to work with. I can have 2 on my first turn to do something with. Be pretty good. Be pretty good. We finally completed the enemy sword color set. Started with Sword of Fire and Ice, then Sword of Light and Shadow, Sword of Body and Mind, Sword of Feast and Famine, and now Sword of War and Peace. Creature gets +2/+2 as protection from Blade and Red. When it deals combat damage to a player, it deals damage to the player equal to the number of cards in their hand, and you gain life equal to the number of those cards. So, the cycle of swords of 2 things that are enemy colors has been complete. Etched Monstrosity. This also kind of completes a set? Group? This started with Etched Oracle in 5th Dawn, and Etched Champion in Scars of Mirrodin, and now Etched Champion. It's another kind of, like, mechanical cycle. It enters the battlefield with 5 -1/-1 counters on it, and then for 1 of each color mana, you can remove them, and target player draws a card. So, you almost sometimes want to maybe add more -1/-1 counters on it, especially if you can get all colors mana. That's up to you. Elish Norm. Another of the Praetors. This was initially considered average for the high casting cost, but this is actually Premier and Reanimator decks. She basically disables opposing aggro decks and creates a fast clock with any other board presence. So she has pretty big use. Why? Well, your creatures get +2/+2. Your opponent's creatures get -2/-2. If you can reanimate her, you just shrink all of your opponent's creatures by -2 instantaneously. 1/1s and 2/2s just die. They just do. Hence why, some pretty big use. We've talked about Karn. Mentioned him a few times now already. Basically, it had some big play in Modern for a while there, too. So, keep that in mind. Dismember. This is a very powerful and versatile removal card. Probably one of the most powerful and versatile that's ever been printed. Accessible in any deck regardless of color. Why is that? It costs Phyrexia mana. You can just pay 4 life and a colorless to cast Dismember. So, this was almost every standard deck during that time it was legal. It's unpopular in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage still, too. So, big one there. It just gives a creature of -5/-5 until end of turn. That can get rid of so many creatures because it's giving a -5/-5. Hey, if that 4/4 indestructible, it's now a 0/0. You have to sacrifice it. That thing that could regenerate, you have to sacrifice it. As long as you can target it with Dismember, 4 life and 1 mana, you can get rid of any problem. Very effective. Surgical Extraction, we talked about being a promo, but it's very Graveyard Hate and a Lobotomy effect at instant speed. without any mana or color restrictions. So it's very versatile, and has been a mainstay in a lot of combo decks and graveyard decks in Modern Legacy and Vintage, at least in sideboards, if not in others. So, 1 Phyrexia mana, black. Choose target card in the graveyard other than the basic land, search opponent's graveyard, hand, library for any number of cards with the same name and exile them. So yeah, that thing in your graveyard, you will probably get copies of it. Too bad, they're all gone. Phyrexia Metamorph, another of the promos. Hey, we're going through the promos. It's a cheap and heavy effectively colorless clone. Had a lot of play in Standard. Is relevant in some older formats too, because it can copy creatures. It costs you 3 and a Phyrexia mana. Enters the battlefield with a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield except artifact in addition to its other types. Cool. That is pretty versatile for a clone. If just to mention it in comparison to a clone from Alpha Beta Unlimited, that was 3 mana in blue, copy a creature. This is intrinsically better because it costs a Phyrexia mana, and it copies also an artifact too, or could copy an artifact or creature. Beast Within. So, it's a pretty big answer to permanence in green. Green is good at artifacts and enchantments, sometimes good against creatures with flying, but a lot of other types of permanence, not great. It kind of is a break in the color pie. It's been a staple in Casual Commander, a lot of play in Modern and Legacy green decks. Basically, you destroy a permanent, creature its controller gets a 3/3 beast. Noxious Revival. Another free colorless spell, like Surgical Attraction, that has some graveyard hate and a lot of combos. You target a card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Could do much to player's graveyard when they want it in the graveyard, or help you bring back something for 2 life or a green. Dispatch. So Dispatch, cheap removal spell for artifact decks in Modern, that can turn into a Path of Exile or Search of Plowshares with no downside. So it's tap a target creature, and if you Metalcraft in an artifact deck, exile a creature instead. Yeah. This has been a staple for artifact decks in that, many in Modern and such. Spell Skype. Man, I was going to try to say that wrong. It's basically a free and powerful protection for creature-based decks. It can redirect removal to itself and prevent an opponent from casting beneficial spells on their creatures. And because it has Phyrexia mana, it can be played in non-blue decks. Yeah. Basically, you can change the target of a spell or ability to it. Has a lot of play and potential there. Pure Steel Paladin. Why do we want to talk about Pure Steel Paladin? It's great in a lot of equipment-based plays. It's, it made a big splash in Standard, and has some, basically, play in some Modern decks at this point in time, because it can equip Colossal Hammer for free. Yeah. When there's the battlefield under control, draw a card, and it gives, things like really expensive equipment, 0 cost. So Pure Steel Paladin has a lot of combo with that. These two. We're just going to talk about these two. These are powerful Infect cards that were actually printed in the common area. Blighted Ancient can't be blocked. Listener Elf only costs a single mana. Yeah. They're 2 commons in Infect that have a lot of potential and have seen a lot of play because they're cheap. And they're common. And they can be your 1-drop or your 2-drop. And they're Infect. Batterskull is one of the best equipment ever printed, and runs along Stoneforward Midships to fetch it and put it in play for cheap, making it hard to deal with creatures. It's a living weapon, and gives a creature a +4 and lifelink. It can whip for 5, it can return return it to its owner's hand, so if it's targeted by something, you can just bounce it. Yeah, +4/+4, Vigilance, lifelink, pretty good. And yes, when you cheat it into play, and then cheat it into being equipped. But remember, it starts out as a living weapon anyway. So it starts out as a 4/4 Vigilance, lifelink. A weapon. Very good. Gut Shot. It's another free colorless spell almost. It's a little bit of removal, direct burn for colorless. So it has a lot of places in Delver, in Kiln Fiend decks and Pauper, in certain decks in Modern, where it can be just a freak spell, dealing 1 damage target creature or player. Is it as good as something like a Lightning Bolt? No. But I can just pay 2 life for this. I don't have to use mana. That's why Gutshot can be good. Now we have these two, which we can talk about, another kind of pair, which were cheap ways to buff and protect creature that work especially well in Infect decks in a lot of formats. So these were pretty big there. Apostle's Blessing, which can be either which is 1 white Phyrexia and 1 colorless, which makes target artifact or creature you control gain protection from artifact or colors of your choice into a turn. That can be 1 mana. And Mutagenic Growth, which again can be paid with life, giving creature +2/+2 until end of turn. Again, that's why these things can be very good in Infect decks. Melina, Sylvok Outcast. This is one of the few cards in the game that directly prevent poison counters from being placed on the player casting. And it poses one of the main mechanics of the set, Flavor. Because creatures you control can have -1/-1 counters placed on them, creatures your opponent control lose Infect, and you can't get poison counters. This was the ultimate counter to this block in a lot of ways, especially the set. Phyrexian Unlife. It combos with Solemnity to create a lock which prevents its controller from ever losing the game. I'll just note, Solemnity, players can't gain counters. Counters can't be put on artifact, creatures, lands, or enchantments. You don't lose the life for having 0 or less life. As long as you 0 or less life, all damage you deal as though the source had Infect. So, yeah. You play the one thing, you can't get counters. In this one, you would be getting counters. Oh man, I no longer get poison counters. Ooh, they go away forever. So yeah, there was a combo basically forever. Deceiver Exarch. Hey, remember that Exarch cycle I talked about? Well, the Deceiver is the one that we want to focus on here. And at the 2 here. Take a drink while we talk about this. The need in my throat. Don't take that out of context. Anyway, it was a major part of the modern Splinter Twin deck, which was pretty big there. It's a flash 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, you either untap target permanent you control or tap another target permanent an opponent controls. And for the notable cards, one last one, Vault Scourge. A strong, aggressive artifact creature that can be basically graced with a lot of pretty big things in pop, because it is a 1/1 flying lifelink that can cost you 1 mana. You just pay with the Phyrexian. Phyrexian mana. It's a thing. We've talked about it now a couple of times. Alright, let's talk about bans and restrictions. We have to start off with Breath and Bond. It was the backbone of several combo decks, abusing self-recurring creatures and creatures with effects when they enter the battlefield to get an advantage. It was banned in Modern, much like Green Sun Scenes from the previous one. So this one, for 1 colorless and a green Phyrexian mana, you sacrifice a creature and search for a creature card with a converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost. So if I sacrifice something that had a converted mana cost of 1, I can get up to 2. Oh no, you get something that costs 2. And then shuffle your library and use it as a sorcerer. So again, you can sacrifice tokens, which cost 0, get 1. Alright. Gitaxian Probe. This one. It's a free card. Costs no mana or cards and gives important information about the opponent's hand. It remained legal in all formats for many years, before getting banned in 2017 when it became more clear that it basically allowed for a lot of degenerate combos for perfect information about it. It was banned in Modern, it's been restricted in Vintage in 2017, banned in Legacy in 2018, and banned in Pauper in 2019. So really the major format to be playing it in right now is Vintage. But you have one. Oh, sorry. Because it is restricted. It's 1 Phyrexian mana, Look at target player's hand, draw a card. It has 2 life for that. Yeah, I can see why it ended a lot of things and eventually did get banned. Similarly speaking, mental misstep. This was a problem much faster than Jaxian Probe. It was banned preemptively when the modern format was created, just a few months after new Phyrexia was released. It's a free counterspell. And it was much stronger. It proved very strong in older formats like Extended and Legacy, which had a lot of cheap spells that could be countered with other copies and stuff like that. So it was banned in Extended and Legacy in 2011, though it would not be restricted in Vintage until 2019. So it is also another one that's restricted in Vintage. You can still play with one there. A counter target spell that can cover the mana cost of 1. Yeah. In these older formats that might have a lot of cheap spells to make them fast and powerful. It had a lot of uses, and it's free. Pay your life for it. Now there's some other cards in the deck we can talk about. Let's get into those and discuss. We'll start with Alloy Mirror. Taps for a mana of any color. Pretty simple there. A 2/2 for 3. Arm with Ether. On the turn, creatures you control will gain 1 to deal damage to opponent. Return target creature and opponent controls to its owner hand. If you're getting a lot of little creatures in, or you're swarming a person, not able to kill them, you can arm with Ether to just get that little bit of thing. Or attack with a number of unblockable things to do that. Cage Sun. You choose a color when it enters the battlefield. Creatures chosen color get +1/+1. Whenever a land ability adds 1 or more mana of the chosen color to your mana pool, add 1 additional mana of the color to the mana pool. So this is kind of like Gauntlet of Might, Gauntlet of Power. Cage Sun is kind of like the update of all of these. You choose a color, you get the +1/+1, and then your lands tap for more color of that mana. Darksteel Relic. It's a 0 indestructible. It's good for Metalcraft, or for sacrifice decks. Again, this is one of those things because it's cheap, it can combo in a lot of places, costs you 0, and it's indestructible anyway. Does it do anything? No. It's made to combo off of other things. Fresh Meat. You get a 3/3 beast creature token in the battlefield for each creature put in your graveyard from the battlefield this turn. Yeah, a bunch of your creatures die. Or maybe you did a board wipe, you get a bunch of beast tokens afterwards. Listening Oil. You give a creature Infect, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a -1/-1 counter on that creature. If it's put in the graveyard to the battlefield, it's returned to your hand. So yeah, you give something Infect, it slowly dies, and then you get the spell back to use again. Hex Parasite, which removes counters from a permanent, and for each counter, it gets bigger. The reason I'm really including this is, for Phyrexia mana and X, you remove a lot of counters from permanents. Any type of counter. That can be very good. Hey, loyalty counters from a Planeswalker. I can just remove them. It's a counter. Isolation Cell. Whenever an opponent casts a creature spell, that player loses 2 life unless they pay 2. Basically, if they want to cast a lot of creatures, they have to pay a tax. Or they lose life. Life's Finale. You destroy all creatures and search target opponent's library for up to 3 creature cards and put them in their graveyard. So it's not only a board wipe, but also gets 3 creatures out of an opponent's library and into their graveyard. Can kind of definitely be mean in certain circumstances. Mind Crank. Whenever an opponent loses life, they put that many cards from their library into their graveyard. Basically, loss of life equals mill. Microsynth Wellspring. This is another from the... I talked about these. The one that when it comes into play, you draw a card, and when it goes to the graveyard, you draw a card for the 2 mana. I don't remember its name off the top of my head. It's really bad. But I also played with this one the same deck. Because again, I was doing block decks, where this one enters the battlefield, or put in the graveyard. You search your library for basic land. When there's drawing a card, this the other Microsynth, I think. So, yeah. Little good things there. Norn's Annex. Hey! It prevents attacks against you. There's Propaganda is another classic one that does this, where people have to pay 2 to attack you. There's other ones that have effects. This one here has Phyrexian mana in it, and creatures can attack you with Planeswalkers control unless they pay a Phyrexian mana, which would be a white or 2 life for each of those creatures. This one's a pretty mean of those defensive ones to prevent people from attacking you. Praetor's Gas. Search a target opponent's library for a card and exile it face down. The player shuffles their library. You may play that card as long as it remains exiled. You steal something, you can play it. They don't know what you stole. It's face down. Pristine Talisman! This is the actual one with the Phyrexian symbol on it, rather than the, Mirrodin Pure one. I like this thing. It is a mana rock, taps for 1 colorless, and you also gain a life. So, if you haven't used it by the end of your opponent's turn, just tap it and gain a life. So, it can have some uses there. Shattered Angel. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under opponent's control, you may gain 3 life. As long as your opponents are playing lands, you gain life. Sheldred Whispered One. Mentioned her earlier, we want to talk about her now. Finally, at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. She reanimates things. At the beginning of each of your opponent's upkeeps, they sacrifice a creature. So yeah, you get creatures back, they lose creatures. Win-win for you, and she's a 6/6 Swamp Walk. Soul Conduit. You exchange life totals. Hey, your opponent with a life-gaining deck. On mine now. Topor Orb. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. You get rid of entering the battlefield abilities. Again, this feels more of a sideboard thing if your opponent is using something like this, but it's a lockdown ability. Triumph of the Hordes. Creatures you control get +1/+1, trample, and infect. Look, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of Overrun is the big classic one that gives a bunch of your creatures a bonus and infect and trample. This one here, I was going to say infect, only gets a small bonus, +1/+1. But it means all of your stuff now tramples, is bigger, and has infect. It's mean. Triumph of the Hordes. Unwinding Claw. Untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. I'm not gonna lie, it has a lot of uses. If you have things that you can tap a bunch of artifacts to charge things, use abilities, those kind of things, you can do them all at the end of your turn, and then during your opponent's untap step, you get them all back. And then the next player, if you're playing multiplayer, you also get it again. Unwinding Claw. Our fourth of the Praetors, Urbrask the Hidden. Creatures you control have haste, and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Pretty simple, not fancy. Urbrask is probably one of the weaker of the Praetors, but still nonetheless, not bad. Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. It's a 7/6 trample. Whenever you tap a land for mana, you add 1 mana to the mana pool of any type that land produced. So, basically, you get extra mana from tapping your lands, and whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, it doesn't untap during its next untap step. So it slows down your opponent's mana, speeds up yours. Again, maybe not the best call. You can rate the Praetors from best to worst, but it's still not bad. And then Xenograph. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Each creature you control is the chosen type in addition to other types. Again, if you're playing a deck that involves a lot of different types of creatures, it's another one that can be incredibly useful. Alright, let's talk about the intro decks. Yay! We've reached that point in time in our discussion. Intro deck time! So, we'll start, of course, with this one here, Artful Destruction. So, this is a green-white deck that focuses on golems and splicers. You create golem creature tokens. As they enter the battlefield, you get bonuses to your golems. There were 2 cards in here that were rares, Blade Splicer and Precursor Golem. Blade Splicer, of course, is the splicer that puts 1 artifact golem token in the battlefield, costs 3 mana, and gives your golems first strike. And Precursor Golem, which comes from Scars of Mirrodin, which puts 2 colorless golems into play when it enters, and when you cast a single instant or sorcery that targets a single golem, you copy it for each other golem. So yeah, if I cast a boost spell that maybe gives one of my golems +1/+1, with Precursor out, all my golems would get that. And it's a golem too. So, yeah, golem deck. Devouring Skies is a blue-black deck that focuses on creatures with flying and equipment. Pretty simple there. Its 2 rares were Phyrexian Jester and Argentum Armor. Of course, Phyrexian Jester being the new one. It's a imprint card that enters the battlefield. You may exile target non-token creature. You don't have to say your control. And it gets +X/+Y, where X is power, Y is toughness. So it enters the battlefield, exiles something, you get it gets bigger. I also kind of like it for, flashing it in and out. Basically, flickering it. because then you can keep exiling creatures. Because every time it enters the battlefield, you exile target non-attacking creature. Yeah. You can just use it as an exile with flickering it. And then Argentum Armor, which is an equipment that goes at +6/+6, and whenever it attacks, destroy target permanent. Another that is, flying, equipment, permanent, target, hate. Yeah. Pretty interesting kind of idea there. Feast of Flesh. It's a red-black aggro deck that focuses on creature removal. We have another Chancellor here, Chancellor of the Dross. It's in your opening hand. Beginning of your first upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life, and it's a flying lifelink. So it is like if you have a bunch of opponents, you drain a bunch of life and gain a bunch of life. And then, of course, the other one is from Scars, Tower of Calamities, where 8 mana, tap, deals 12 damage to target creature. Again, the old tower sets that were from the original Mirrodin block. This was the one that kind of completed the towers. Anyway, you move on then to Life for Death, a red-white deck that focuses on life gain and Phyrexian mana. So I'll be gaining life, and then spending life on Phyrexian mana. It has Rage Extractors in it. You can put more in there. I didn't use this to make mine, but I did make a Rage Extractor deck. Anyway, our 2 rares here were Molten Steel Dragon and Phyrexian Rebirth. Molten Steel Dragon is a dragon that's flying, that for Phyrexian mana gets +1/+1/10, 4/4. And so you could technically pay it for 4 colorless and 4 life if you wanted to, and then get bigger. And then, of course, Phyrexian Rebirth from Mirrodin Besieged destroys all creatures and puts big horror and broken into the battlefield. To finish up our intro decks, we have the Ravaging Swarm, a green-blue deck that focuses on Infect, where back in Scars, it would have been kind of black-green Infect. This is blue-green Infect. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition here for the infection, so to say. Anyway, the 2 rares here were Phyrexian Swarmlord and Inoxable Tide. Probably butchering it. My brain wasn't safe there. Phyrexian Swarmlord, I mean, it's kind of one that I'd really want in any Infect deck in a lot of ways. It's a 4/4 Infect for 6 mana at the beginning of upkeep. You get a 1/1 green insect creature with Infect for each poison counter your opponents have. The more poison counters your opponents have, when you have Swarmlord out, the more Infect creatures you get to swarm them more. Yeah. And of course, the Tide, when you cast a spell, proliferate. I see what this deck is doing. And it's mean. Very, very mean. That's fine. Talk about the event decks to finish up today. We'll start with Rot from Within. From Within. This is an aggro green deck that with a focus on the Infect mechanic. And like many of the sets around here, of course, it is important to note that, yes, it, whoops. That got reset. That was weird. Sorry. I've had weird technical issues with this entire thing today. So, yes, it's made to be aggressive. It's made to be pure green. So, there are a bunch of rares in this deck. Each of the decks has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rares. In this case, though, there are multiples of some of the rares. So keep that in mind why there is only 5 cards being shown off here. This is Inkmoth Nexus, Putrefax, twice. Queen Sun Zenith, Milerna, Sobak Akkes, Obstinate Baloth, twice. Okay. So, yeah. Inkmoth Nexus, land becomes a creature with flying and infect until end of turn. Putrefax, a trample, haste, infect that you sacrifice. Green Sun Zenith, where you search your library for a creature with a mana cost F. We talked about it in Mirrodin Besieged. Pretty interesting one. Mirla, we talked about her. An Obstinate Baloth from M11, enters battlefield, you gain some life, and the spell or ability causes you to discard it, you put it in the battlefield instead. If you combine that with something else that you have to discard something to, hey, get it out for free, you cheat it in. But this, again, it is being part of the event decks. It has everything from standard at the time. So it's got M11, it's got the Zendikar block, and now at this point in time, the entire Scars of Mirrodin block. So it's got 7 sets that's building from for this deck here. So very interesting there for a pure green deck that you have for the event. On the other hand, the other event deck was a white aggro deck that you focus on equipment and living weapons. War of Attrition. So yeah, the 2 event decks were colored. Green, white. Green infect, white, equipment, aggro. These are a little outside, not quite completely outside your kind of idea for the colors, but a little kind of weirdly on there. Anyway, for this one, we had a good number of rares. Kev McCaw, Regent. Mirrodin Crusader, Pure Steel Paladin, talked about him today. Stoneford Mystic, talked about them with the Zendikar block, Sword of Vengeance, and Bone Horde. Of course, Kev McCaw, which you get cat tokens for each equipment attached to it. Mirrodin Crusader, which has a double strike and protection from black and green. Hey, countering at the other one there. Pure Steel Paladin, we talked about Pure Steel Paladin. Stoneford Mystic, which enters, you search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle your library, and you can put equipment into battlefield, from your hand into the battlefield with it, hey? And Sword of Vengeance from M11, when a creature gets +2/+0, first strike, trample, haste, and vigilance. And of course, Bone Horde, where it gets +X, for X number of creature cards in all graveyards for a living weapon. But, yeah. There you go. A little bit of weird problems there, but that was new Phyrexia. Yeah. There was a lot of interesting things here, and this is the end of Infect, as we know. Not that we don't have poison counters and stuff from the new Phyrexia and stuff that we'll see again when we return to that plane in future sets. But for now, the mechanic of Infect really goes away. Again, it becomes a very Phyrexian. And there are a lot of mechanics and abilities here that maybe we don't see again. A lot of interesting things here. As we can see, there are a lot of good cards here. Some of them not as much anymore, but certainly there are some that are still played today in a lot of decks. And I think that's an important part about talking about some of these sets, is when we talk about these cards which are still played today, where they came from, and what other cards were around them. Are there other things that maybe aren't top-tier competitive decks that maybe inspire you to build something? Maybe one of these Praetors gives you an idea for a very interesting Praetor commander deck. Sure, your commander is expensive. Maybe new ways to cheat some mana or cheat them in or something like that, or all of the other abilities or stuff like that. There might be ways to do things. Or some of the other legends, like Dracovin. And then learn it. Even in other types of formats, there are a lot of interesting ideas for a lot of these cards. So I hope, as I've always had, these inspire you to look into these. Again, this was another one that I did the preview stuff and had a really good time with. So, hey, hope you enjoyed diving into this, finishing up the Scars of Mirrodin block, which was the block that got me back into Magic back in 2011, when I really got back into it. Right. We'll leave that there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I do really hope you enjoyed. We'll talk about more history of Magic in the future. If you want to see any of my tabletop stuff, please check it out online. I either record stuff live on Twitch, throw it up on YouTube. All my tabletop stuff on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching us there, you can see it all there. Always make sure to join me live. You can always catch me there. That's where I do gameplay, just some video games, some gameplay with friends, tabletop recordings, live play TTRPGs. Fall of Avansfall just started. I'd recommend checking that out. Wednesdays at 8, and discussing tabletop Saturdays at 6. We'll talk about news of the week and deep dive into tabletop in our kind of sort of podcasty format. We'll probably make it a podcast for Wednesdays. Check out my social media link below, Discord, Blue Sky, /X. And yeah, just remember, at least give that basic support of like, subscribe, hit the bell over here. And did you have any experience with new Phyrexia? And what do you think of these cards? Just let me know. Anyway, until the next time we dive into the history of Magic Gathering or something else related to tabletop or Magic itself, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.